City Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. We're doing this video today because we tend to just make some really crazy changes to rankings throughout the offseason all summer long. And this is meant to be a good reminder, not only for us, but to every single person playing fantasy football, not to get too crazy over the offseason. We can make some changes, but these are the type of rankings, players, notes, stats that we need to look at going into next year. So we're doing this episode so that you guys don't forget. Dave, I think this is going to be a good reminder for us.
Yeah, and I think it'll be really fun to revisit this a couple of months from now because changing rankings throughout the offseason is something that happens. There's free agency, there's the draft. We're going to dig up information on some players that may have evaded us over the last couple of weeks here. And, as new information comes out, we have to change these. So I think it'll be really fun to look back at these, in August and see how much these have changed because there are some names specifically that I'm really excited to talk about. Chuba Hubbard, Bucky Irving, these guys that really kind of burst onto the scene. Are they fool's gold or are they going to be RB1s again next year? It's really tough to rank these guys, so I'm excited to talk through it.
Yeah, we're going to go through our top 36 players. I ranked a set of players. Dave ranked a set of players. We came up with our average, and then we put them into tiers. So before we get into the tiers, I actually want to take a look at three specific players that missed the cut by just a little bit. And those three are Jalen Hurts, Terry McLaurin, and Jaden Daniels.
And by miss the cut, you're saying basically miss the cut of like the top three rounds.
Right. Like they just missed the top 36. They are ranked as 37, 38, 39. And these were just some big names that I wanted us to take a look at. Specifically, it's these two quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts. Dave, Jaden Daniels was a guy that we all kind of put around that QB 10, QB 12 range going into the year and said, man, if there's a guy that has the potential to jump into the top 4, top 5, it's Jaden Daniels. Well, here he is. And right now, we've got him ranked as quarterback 3 going into next year. Is there anything that could possibly change that going into 2025?
I don't think so. I mean, it's tough to move them ahead of Lamar and Allen because they have the sustained success. We've seen them do it for multiple years. Jaden Daniels, a lot of people, there might be a discount on him next year, actually. It wouldn't surprise me if people say, well, look at CJ Stroud and what he did in year 1 and year 2. I mean, I hope that people start. Yeah, I really hope that starts to get parroted. But I think that as he just continues to make this run in the playoffs, people are going to say, wow, Jaden Daniels is the real deal. So I've got him ahead of Jalen Hurts. I know you have him ahead of Jalen Hurts as well. And Jalen Hurts is another guy who has prolonged and sustained success in fantasy football. But Jaden Daniels, the way that he plays, it's much more like Lamar Jackson, where he can rip off these 70, 80-yard touchdowns. He is a very good passer as well. He's got weapons around him. Jalen Hurts, he puts up the fantasy points, but he is so reliant on those touchdowns, which just continue to go up every single year. I think Jaden Daniels is just the better player. He's not relying on the situation. He's not relying on the players around him. He's just going to go out there and score points. So, we've really got him on the bubble. I've got him just inside the top 36. You've got him at 36. But yeah, I think that's exactly where he belongs, is in the tier by himself, right behind Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen.
And I think the bigger conversation here, too, is going to be how you value quarterbacks next year.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to be putting him? You may not have him at quarterback 1 or 2, but you could probably keep him pretty close to Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson based on his fantasy points per game. He does have a little bit of that passing advantage over Jalen Hurts. And then it's going to be interesting to look at the grand scheme of things, the full scope of the quarterback position, because if we start to say, well, the quarterback position is pretty deep, now you have to start to think of, does Jaden Daniels give you that much of an advantage over the other quarterbacks? And right now, I'd say yes. So I think I'm still willing to draft him late 3rd round, kind of where we have him here as pick number 37 overall.
Yeah, I think with quarterbacks, it's great or late again. And I think that the great guys that you're targeting are going to be Allen, Lamar, Daniels, and Hurts. If you don't get one of those 4, don't fall into the trap of reaching, because for the QB5, QB6, QB7, for those guys to hit, you just need variance to break in their way. And as we saw this year, guys like Baker Mayfield, guys like Sam Darnold, who went undrafted, you were able to just pick up off of waivers and you were getting top 10 production. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned this year. And I fell into the trap a little bit with Kyler Murray and some of the other mid-round quarterbacks. I'm just not doing it next year. Like if I don't get one of those top 4 guys, I'm going to wait, and then I'm going to wait some more, and then I'm going to wait some more. I might not even draft a quarterback if I don't get one of those top 4 guys.
I mean, time is a flat circle. The more and more we keep playing fantasy football and new strategies come around, Just like we talked about this year, it was greater late with tight end. It
Mhm.
was greater late with quarterback. It was go out and get a workhorse running back. We're right back to where we were 5, 6 years ago. But it'll be interesting to see going through this summer and seeing how we sort of change our minds and what new information presents itself, especially
Shout
after
out
free
JJ
agency and the
Zacharyson,
draft.
late round quarterback. Good thing he went with that
Yes.
branding rather than like Toby Gerhart Truther or whatever, like 10 years ago when he started his brand. He really nailed it with the late round quarterback. That is an evergreen name.
JJ, it was so funny because last year he was saying, well, gonna have to do a study because we might have to actually start to change the brand. And then really he came back with, no, I don't. No, I
Yeah.
don't. We're good.
Yep.
We're good. And this
Yep.
season kind of helped him out with that. All right, so let's get officially into the top 36 players that we have here, starting in tier 6. We're going to work our way from number 36 all the way to 1. I'm sure you guys can guess who the top 2 or 3 players are, but at 36, we've got George Kittle, tight end for the San Francisco 49ers. Once again, he had himself a great season. Dave, I believe tight end
I'd
1
prefer
in points per
Daniels
game.
ahead of Kittle. Just let the
Okay.
record show.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I know
we're
you
we're
do. You
splitting hairs here, but yeah, I'd probably take Daniels ahead of Kittle if I was in a draft right now.
Yeah, you have Daniels 1 spot ahead of Kittle. I have Kittle 1 spot ahead of Daniels in my
Yeah,
overall rankings.
really splitting
And
hairs.
yeah, I have Daniels in my top 36.
Mhm.
But Kittle, I have him at 34. You've got him at 37 overall. It's a guy I think at the tight end position still gives you that advantage. And I kind of think like he is the dividing line where once you get past the top 3 tight ends with him being tight end number 3, I don't know how much I truly trust the remaining tight ends after him. But
Yeah.
let's get to the next guy on here. This is where we have, I guess, a dissenting opinion at 35. Chuba Hubbard, running back for the Carolina Panthers. And Dave, I don't have a problem with Chuba Hubbard, but you've got him ranked a lot higher. Chuba Hubbard was a top 10 running back in 5 of his last 7 games. There's not a lot of guys that you find with that type of production, not a lot of guys that you find that you know are going to have that role going into the next season. He finished as running back 12 on the season, likely no Jonathan Brooks for pretty much all of next season. I think we can probably write that down in pen. And then he's my running back 15. 40th overall. I see him as a good, maybe late 3rd, early 4th round pick. Dave, you're a bit higher on Chuba Hubbard. You've got him as your 31st overall player, meaning you're willing to take him a little bit earlier in that 3rd round.
Yeah, he's a darn good running back, man. He really took a big step forward this year. There was nothing in the first few years of his career that really made me think that he was anything other than just another running back. And
Right.
then this year, he just showed out. You know, we saw some of the breakaway runs, we saw moving piles. He just developed into a really good running back, and that's why Carolina gave him this $33 million contract. You already said it. Jonathan Brooks likely won't be back next year. Miles Sanders, they've got an out in his contract. So we saw him just dominating with a massive work share during the entire 2024 season. I don't think they stray away from that, right? Like, this is what we knew about Dave Canales, and this is why we like Jonathan Brooks so much. The way he rode Rashad White 2 years ago, the way he rode Chuba Hubbard last year, I think he's going to do it again in 2025. And we saw at the end of the year that Bryce Young is actually a good quarterback. Everything from his rookie season, everything from the beginning of year 2, I think we can kind of throw away because he was making throws that very few guys in the NFL can make. So this is me just kind of going back to the well, the same thesis that I had last offseason, that I'm a believer in Bryce Young. I'm a believer in Dave Canales, and the RB1 on that team is going to put up points, and I think that's going to be Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah, the big thing for me is, I mean, you mentioned Bryce Young improving, Dave Canales, his usage with running backs, but a lot of that stuff doesn't happen if the offensive line in Carolina isn't good. And that was the big thing that they invested in over the offseason was
Yeah.
the offensive line. And if that offensive line remains the way it is, which everything should, and they should continue to play well, not sensing that Carolina is going to be losing any coaches or losing any pieces, I think you run it back with Chuba Hubbard. And honestly, just as we're talking here, I'm looking at the next running back that I have in my rankings, and I think I'd prefer Chuba Hubbard over him. So I think I'm already starting to move him up just a little bit, but I think he'll be right outside of that RB1 conversation for
And
me.
as we said at the top of the show, these rankings are a living and moving, breathing document. They're going to change a lot. And I'm really interested to see where ADP, average draft position, lands on Chuba Hubbard, because I think he'd have to like crack inside round 2 for me to kind of be out. Like, if I could still get Chuba Hubbard at the top of the 3rd round, I'm probably doing it. I think he'd have to like get inside the top 24 before I'd start double guessing, clicking that button.
He's a perfect round 3 running back.
Yeah.
He's a perfect round 3 running back. That's exactly where you want him because he's a guy that's going to be getting tons of volume, which is why I'm very comfortable taking him where he's at. I probably should have him a little bit higher than 40, but yeah,
Which
he's
I
our
will say,
number 35 player.
a lot of the characteristics of a dead zone running back, and I think that could, end up making him a value on draft day. A day 3 pick who just kind of has one season that stands out as an outlier, but I'm just a believer that he took a developmental step forward, and I will be in next year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's, if anything, I kind of look at him as like another James Conner, but on an offense that is
Yeah,
ascending.
yeah.
It's almost a similar profile when we're looking at it. All right, let's keep moving on here. At number 34, we've got Garrett Wilson, who, listen, his value could fluctuate so much depending on what the Jets do at quarterback, what they end up doing with losing or trading Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams. We don't know what's going to happen there.
Oh, they're
Garrett Wilson
gone.
remains a guy. Yeah, they are, and it's a matter of like, what are they going to do? How are they going to do it? Wilson just remains a guy who's probably just going to keep getting volume, but for one reason or another, it just hasn't happened. So that's one of those rankings where I think it's very much in flux. Dave, the next one on here, number 33, we've got Joe Mixon, running back for the Houston Texans. I'm much lower on Joe Mixon. I've got him at, you know what, I'm putting Chuba Hubbard ahead of him. So I've got Joe Mixon as the 40th overall player. Dave, you've got him at 24th. You are willing to, by these rankings, take him at the end of the second round. What makes you higher on Joe Mixon? Because last year, I mean, it was kind of a tale of not two halves, but
Oh,
he
it
was running back
was. Yeah.
five. Yeah, it was. I mean, running back five in points per game, running back 13 overall. But the final 6 weeks was where it got really rough, averaging 9.5 points per game, running back 28 over those final 6 games. What keeps your faith in Joe Mixon going forward?
He picked up some injuries that I think lingered and really hurt his efficiency. The workload didn't change all that much. He was still getting a workhorse treatment in this offense. The efficiency just fell off a cliff. Now, is that because he's getting up there in age? Is it because he's breaking down because of all the touches he's had throughout his career? Or is it just last year's injuries that are kind of piling up? I'm going to lean towards the injuries. And I know that, a 29-year-old running back is going to scare off a lot of people, but still, when you're getting over 20 opportunities per game and you're expected to go back to the same team that you were on last year, this Texans team started to show some life at the end of the season, despite the really rough start. So, just trying to bet on a good player in what I assume will be a good offense, a guy that we can project a lot of workload on. Joe Mixon, I think taking him at the 2-3 turn, I'd be comfortable doing that.
I'm not quite there. I think he's one of those guys that I think we've seen the ceiling. I think we've seen how good it can be for Joe Mixon, and I'd rather try to find him at more of a value than taking him in that second round. I don't want him to be the second best player on my team. Is basically the way I want to phrase that. Next one on here at 32, another one that we disagree on pretty heavily. Tyreek Hill, wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins. And I think there's a lot of reasons for people just to be out on Tyreek going into next season. Dave, I've got him as my 23rd player. You've got him at 39. I've seen rankings where Tyreek Hill is all the way outside of the top 40, outside of the top 50. And then I've seen other ones that still have him inside the top 12. This
Yeah, I've
seems
got I've
like
got a round 4 tag on him. I've got him at
yeah,
39. That means I'm not even thinking about him until round 4.
and I get it. I get it. I think this is going to be one of the most divisive players throughout the fantasy offseason, and it's going to be all about what the reports say as we go throughout the offseason. Is he healthy? Do you believe that he can still play? And that's where I'm looking at right now. He was wide receiver 30 in points per game last year, wide receiver 20 overall. Over those final 9 weeks, he was wide receiver 12. Now, it wasn't the same typical MVP caliber stuff we've seen from Tyreek Hill in the past, but a lot of that we found out in the off after the season was done was a wrist issue, an injury that was stemming from training camp that he had all throughout the season. He thought it was going to be getting better. And then that weird pregame arrest he had like early in the season made it worse, he says. And he was contemplating surgery. Now he's going to get surgery in the off season. He ended up missing a lot of practice time. And he said because of that missing practice, it led to drops and bad timing with Tua, and they weren't getting the reps they wanted. Either way, the way I'm looking at this is I think the wide receiver overall days for Tyreek Hill are probably behind him just simply because of age, injuries, whatever limitations we might have with the Dolphins. But I still think that being a top 5 or top 6 wide receiver is very possible for him. I know that older receivers that rely on athleticism tend to fall out quick, but I'm still willing to bet on this player in the late second round because we know what the upside is there. And he could be one of those guys where the value is just too good to pass up on him in the late second, early third round.
Yeah, I mean, you did the B rabbit there. You talked about all the reasons that Tyreek Hill shouldn't be a good pick, so it's hard for me to kind of follow that up because you followed it up with like, the upside is still there, and I agree with that. Like the upside is still there, but the reality is that, aging wide receivers who are trending down don't typically bounce back. We'll see it every now and then, but I'm just trying to read the tea leaves here. It looks like Tyreek Hill might be washed. Like you said,
Well,
he's
there's a
an older.
reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason that a guy has to be trending down. If the trend was downward because of injury, I'm more willing to just let that pass by and adjust for next season. If this was we thought he had a clean bill of health all year, then yeah, he's washed. But you have so many games that with Tua wasn't there. You have all these games where big drops happen, and I'm going to try to attribute that to the wrist. I don't know, but that's where I think you kind of have that calculated risk that I'm willing to take.
I just thought it was kind of funny that the news about the wrist injury didn't come out until midway in the season when he was playing terribly. Like this wasn't something that he said he got injured. It was kind of a,
Right.
hey, this is why I've been so bad. And you know what they say about excuses, Alfredo? Everyone's got one and they all stink.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've heard that one. I've heard that one. I was really wondering which direction you were going to go with there. Yeah. It's, and it's weird. They're doing like a whole investigation thing as to whether it was the Dolphins that didn't report the injury or whether it was Tyreek that didn't report the injury. But immediately when we get into the offseason and he's talking about trade stuff and no, I don't want to get traded. I am committed to playing here. There's a lot going on back and
I
forth.
think the way I might be able to move Tyreek Hill up is if he gets traded or if he signs with a new team. Let's say he signs with the Chargers, a team that needs that real deep threat. Then I might be in on Tyreek Hill. Or if he signs with the Bears and they let Keenan Allen walk and they have somebody that has a quarterback with a big arm who needs that deep threat. I might be able to talk myself into Tyreek Hill, but assuming his situation stays the same, staying in Miami with Mike McDaniel and Tua, I think we've just kind of seen that story this year, and I don't want to be a part of that again next year.
I just saw enough drops on Tyreek to say he wasn't himself.
Yeah.
There were big plays left on the field where maybe that wide receiver 12 over the final, what was it? Final 9 weeks is looking probably closer to wide receiver 3 or 4 over the final 9 weeks. So I'm still willing to say that there are big plays left on the field for him, and I might be one of the people that's highest on Tyreek Hill. That's not a fandom thing. I rarely support Miami Dolphins in fantasy football, so don't bring that over here. Next here, in closing out this tier at 31, we've got James Cook. You and I both have him as our 30th ranked player,
Which kind of
then
feels
at 30,
too low, if I'm being honest. I mean, we'll see what they do this offseason. It's hard with running backs, but when I ranked James Cook, I wanted to move him higher, and it's just kind of hard to do. But man, he's just been a workhorse and a good offense. It's if that's where he lands, kind of a round 3 pick, I'll probably have a lot of James Cook next year.
Well, and I guess the question is, I kind of wonder what the Bills are going to do if they lose again to the Chiefs. Like,
Hmm.
do you start to make some crazy sweeping changes, or even if you win a Super Bowl, do you run it back with the exact same team? No, you're probably going to go and just add more weapons to the arsenal. Not saying that James Cook won't get his touches and that he's not a great running back. I think he's probably appropriately valued at the moment. Next one on here at 30 is T. Higgins, and that rounds out our tier number 6.
There's not much to say about T. Higgins. We'll
Yeah,
we'll have our T.
you got to see
Higgins
where he
takes
plays.
in a couple of months when he signs somewhere.
Yeah, we got to see where he plays. At tier 5, let's start here. Number 29 overall, we've got Lad McConkey, Dave, and this is where you and I have once again a little bit of a disagreement in the rankings. I have Lad as my 33rd overall player. You have him up at 22. Now, for Lad, the thing with me is, I mean, we'll go back and look at the season. Wide receiver 20 in points per game, wide receiver 13 overall. He didn't miss any games, really. And that's such a big thing for him because in college, he was missing games constantly. And I was very worried about his frame and his bill of health from previous years and how that was going to hold up in the NFL. He did fine. For me, what I look at is the hyper efficiency that he had in this offense, and that might not change. So that is something to consider. But hyper efficient, 8 touchdowns on the season. Dude is averaging 7 targets per game. I think when a lot of people think Lad McConkey, they look at, oh, well, he got 100 targets, and this is going to be a target monster. He's playing out of the slot, right? It's another Julian Edelman. He's going to be a PPR machine. That wasn't quite it. It was the yards per reception
in the second half.
Yeah. Oh, let's play a game, Dave. Who had a higher yards per reception this season?
Lad McConkey.
Lad McConkey? Lad McConkey or Brian Thomas Jr.?
I'm going to guess Lad McConkey.
All right, Lad McConkey or Justin Jefferson?
Lad McConkey.
Lad McConkey or Jamar Chase?
I'm going to go with Lad McConkey here.
Lad McConkey. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Lad McConkey, the little slot that could. Wait, that didn't sound right.
Oh, no. No, no, no.
the
Julia, cut that.
let's cut it, cut it. Yeah, the guy who we assumed was all going to be catching passes near the line of scrimmage, quick plays, and just fall down afterwards. He was getting a ridiculous yards per reception ahead of all the biggest names in football. And that's the only thing that makes me say, can he keep up the efficiency? Not that I think he's a bad player, or not that I think he's not worthy of a top 3 round pick. Can he keep up that efficiency? Are the Chargers going to add more pieces? I think everyone is mocking a tight end to the Chargers in the NFL draft, and more pass catchers after the Quentin Johnston playoff fiasco. I think there's a lot that could happen to that offense this offseason.
T. Higgins would be nice. No,
Ooh,
I
it would.
can't stop. T. Higgins in Los Angeles catching passes from Justin Herbert would be great, and that would cause me to knock McConkey down a little bit. But man, I just look at what he did. You kind of use it to like the efficiency as a reason to knock him, and I understand that. We'd see him potentially regress next year. But what I saw is in the first half of the season, he was that Julian Edelman type of receiver, the slot guy who's just catching the short passes, trying to make plays after the catch. And then in the second half of the year, he developed into this downfield threat who was making yards after the catch and making big plays. And when I see that, man, like from week 8 onward, the second half of the season, Lad McConkey was the wide receiver 8 in scoring. Like Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, Amon St. Brown, and Jamar Chase were the only guys that outscored Lad McConkey over that period. And I just think he's a really, really good receiver. You look at the numbers, he gave us very similar production to Brian Thomas Jr., Brock Bowers, these other rookies that we're super excited about. But for whatever reason, Lad McConkey just isn't getting that same respect. I looked a while back at some historical comps. Every NFL wide receiver with 75 receptions, 1,000 plus yards, and 7 plus touchdowns as a rookie, it's a short list. Anquan Bolden, Michael Clayton, Odell Beckham Jr., Michael Thomas, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and then Lad McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, they have joined very
Great
elite
list.
company in what they did their rookie season. So anytime I see a rookie put up really good numbers, I am buying that guy aggressively in year 2. And that's just where I fall with McConkey.
Yeah, I think what we're going to have to wait for, Dave, is like you said with previous players, is ADP. Where is the fantasy football community valuing this player once we get into
Right.
drafts? And that's going to decide, am I drafting this guy early? Am I going to take him in round 2? Do I wait for him in round 3? Like where could he be going? Yeah, that's the only thing with me is I do worry about, can he remain efficient if the Chargers passing volume doesn't improve? That's all. That's all. But I still have him firmly at the beginning of or middle of round 3. All right, next year on this list, 28 and 27, we have our quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Dave, we both have Lamar Jackson as quarterback 1, Josh Allen as quarterback 2, but he is also exactly one spot behind Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
I don't think this is a matter of who is better, because they both have proven they can be the quarterback 1 overall in fantasy. I think it's just kind of who falls further in your draft and you're able to get the better value. That's quite literally it.
I think the way drafts are going to shake out this year, I think like 90% of fantasy drafts, you're going to see somebody draft Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, and then the other of the two that wasn't drafted is going to go in the next 1 to 2 picks. I think that's it. Like these guys have just been consistently top 2 fantasy quarterbacks year after year after year. I prefer Lamar to Josh Allen, as do you. Some other people are going to prefer Josh Allen to Lamar. I don't feel like getting, the Lamar Allen argument, like who deserves to be MVP, who should be the QB1 in fantasy. These guys are just going to be pinned against each other for the next decade. I don't really care all that much. I think you kind of have the right idea. I'd be happy with either. And if I'm in a draft where somebody takes one of these guys, I will just take whoever's left over with my next pick.
I have a feeling that what's going to happen in home leagues is whichever player wins MVP is going to end up being the quarterback 1 in leagues.
Yeah.
And that's
Or
it.
Or
Or the
Josh
Super
Allen.
Bowl,
I mean,
actually.
Josh Allen might
Yeah.
make the Super Bowl and Lamar can't. So, I mean, just
That's
that deeper run
good-
into the
good point.
playoffs could stay fresh in people's memories too.
Yeah, that's it. I think if man, that's going to be really funny. Lamar wins MVP, Josh Allen wins Super Bowl MVP, and we're just doing the same song and dance all off season long.
I think Allen's getting the MVP though. Betting odds have him as the pretty heavy favorite right now. I like the idea of a co-MVP, but sounds like they're finally going to get one to Allen.
Yeah, no participation trophies in the NFL, Dave. No co-MVPs. All right,
I
next
hate
on
my
here.
next ranking, if I'm being honest. I'm looking at it. I think I'm too low on
Good,
this
because I hate
guy.
it too.
Yeah.
Good. Let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
Hold
So
on to
26.
some priors from last offseason, I suppose.
At 26, we got Drake London. I have him ranked as my 18th player. This is a guy that I will value very heavily in the second round. Dave, you got him at 32, but like you said, there's already a little bit of that ranker's remorse, I guess, with Drake
Yeah.
London. To set the table for him, Drake London, big year in 2024. And looking at just the stats, just so we can get all that out there for the people that live in the spreadsheets. Drake London, third in targets, fourth in yards, fifth in touchdowns, ninth in receptions. And man, small sample size with Michael Penix there at the end of the season, but he was first in targets per route run, third in first downs per route run, first in first read target share. And this is, I mean, first, third, first, like all these numbers I'm throwing out there, third in targets, fourth in yards, fifth in touchdowns. Like this is not something that we need to be thumbing our nose at. Drake London could end up being one of those next big breakout guys. I know we talked about him as a breakout this past year. He did. He lived up to that expectation. But with Michael Penix, that could get even better because Kirk Cousins was just so awful this past year.
Yeah. I mean, Alfredo, I released this article the Monday morning after week 17. So I hadn't seen week 18 shake out yet. I'm sorry, audience members. I probably should have, ran through these and tightened them up before publishing. But really, it was that week 18 game that I saw from Drake London that made me realize I was a little bit too low on him. Michael Penix, first of all, looks like the real deal. He played great in that game. But there was one thing specifically that jumped out to me in that game where I'm like, okay, I need to get higher on Drake London. And that was when he targeted him in the end zone and the play got broken up. And then the very next play, they ran the same exact play and he targeted him deep in the end zone again. And this time Drake London came down with the ball. And that's what we know Drake London is really good at are contested catches. And he might not be the best separator because he doesn't have that elite athleticism and speed, but he is so good at attacking the ball at the catch point that if he has a quarterback like Michael Penix that'll just throw the ball up there and let him make plays, that's exactly what I want to see. And Drake London hasn't had that type of quarterback at this point in his career. Now he does. So I'm admittedly too low on Drake London. I think he should be inside the second round just based off of what I saw in that week 18 game.
Yeah, I mean, we got a full off season of Drake London and Michael Penix practicing together. I think we are starting to reach that pinnacle of the Drake London hype. And guys, I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden we're getting into fantasy football draft season and people are pushing him into that back end of round one. I don't
He
know
was
that I'm
already
going
going
to
there
be
last
there.
year. He was already
Yeah,
at the 1-2 turn.
I don't know that I'm going to be there, but I do think there are going to be people pushing the agenda that he should probably be a top 5 or 6 wide receiver in fantasy. And I don't know that you and I will ever get there, Dave, but he's still a damn good player. And that's where I'm at with Drake London. Next on here, 25, Ashton Jeanty, the rookie running back out of Boise State. It just all depends, I guess. Yeah, there it is. Where does he get drafted?
Goes to
When does
Dallas,
he
cool.
go?
I'm taking him in round one, probably. If he
Yeah.
falls to day two and signs with the team that has an established running back, probably passing on him. It's so hard to speculate on running backs right now. It really is.
Yeah, and I mean, like there's a little bit of dissension between us in that ranking. That's why I just have him a little bit lower, but he'll probably end up being a round 2 pick when all is said and done in fantasy football. Next up on here, now we actually officially get into what we would consider our round 2 of fantasy football rankings, and we keep going through this tier. At 24, Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks. Dave, we've got about 10 spots of disagreement here. I've got JSN as my 19th player. You've got him at 29. For me, JSN, wide receiver 19 in points per game this past season, wide receiver 8 overall. He didn't miss any time, really. And what it was for me was that back half of the season. I don't want to do the thing where I posted a thread earlier on X, whatever it's called, and it was all about how people love to use the arbitrary trends towards the end of the season from from the final 3 weeks, the final 5 weeks, final 10 weeks, whatever.
Hey, pick whichever one best supports your argument. Like you see that one boom game, and then from here onward, he was great.
Yes. Yes. So let's do that now with JSN. From week
We already
9
did it with
on.
McConkey. Yeah, let's do it with JSN
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. From week 9 on, wide receiver 6 in points per game, wide receiver 7 overall. It's quite literally the back half of the season. And I just think that we are starting to see the initial concepts of a plan for a guy who could be a top 12 wide receiver every single year. A lot of his fantasy success is not predicated on touchdowns. It's predicated on volume and what he can do with the ball in his hands. And I think everyone can admit this past season, JSN took over as the wide receiver one for Seattle from DK Metcalf. And DK kind of became that field stretcher that was opening things up for JSN, who became the easy target underneath in the middle of the field and a bit deeper than before. He wasn't getting all those screen passes that he's been getting in the past, Dave.
Yeah, I think the timeline for JSN's emergence does coincide with the DK Metcalf knee injury.
Mm-hmm.
DK Metcalf missed a couple of games, and then when he came back, he just never really got back up to speed. So I think that's the only reason I'm a bit more trepidatious on JSN.
It's
I think
fair.
he's a very good talent, and I like the player a ton, and I want to rank him higher. But a healthy DK Metcalf should be a little bit more involved than he was over the second half of last season. In addition to that, I know you saw the news, Alfredo. I couldn't believe it that Ryan Grubb got fired. I think that there were some
Crazy.
issues, but I think the main issue that they had with him is that Seattle wanted to run the ball, and they never really took the time to establish the run. It was a very pass-heavy scheme, which we like, and that's great for fantasy football, but that clearly doesn't align with the game plan that the Seattle front office has. And sure, there were some questions about Ryan Grubb, but I don't think he deserved to be fired. I think what that firing tells me is that they want to go back to this old school smash mouth, establish the run with Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. And that worries me because if we
Probably.
do see that pass rate fall off next year, there's not going to be as much to go around. If there's not as much to go around, and if DK Metcalf is back and healthy again next year, that could slightly diminish the ceiling for JSN. It all depends on where his ADP falls. If he's falling in around 3 and 4, I'm going to be drafting him like crazy. If he's going as high as you'd have him ranked, 19 in the middle of round 2, I probably won't be drafting him quite as much. Very good player, but I think there's just going to be a lot of changes in Seattle going into next year.
I'm actually trying to look it up right now. I want to see Seattle's run rate because it didn't feel like they were running the ball a whole lot less. Oh yeah, they were.
They were, yeah.
Yeah,
It
they
was
were.
they were
Yeah,
one of the
they
most
were
pass
bottom
heavy
five team.
teams in neutral situations. Yeah, and that's great for JSN, especially when DK Metcalf was injured. But if they just go back towards the median next year, that could worry me slightly. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. Like Ryan Grubb finally unlocked JSN. I just am interested to see who they bring in to be the OC next year.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, Dave. That's a great point. That might make me push JSN down a little bit, and probably just have him closer to the Lad McConkey area, and move Lad up, move JSN down, have them just sandwiched a little bit closer.
That's why we have these discussions, man. It's
Yes.
January 21st. Nobody's drafting today anyway. We got a whole off season to figure out where we want to be drafting these guys.
But it's also good to remember and like kind of just take these notes down of where we were at the end of last
Mhm.
season so that we don't do these crazy sweeping changes where a rookie comes in or a big free agent signing happens and we go, oh my God, move him up second round, first round, whatever it is. Just
Yep.
remember where we were at this time so that we don't do anything too crazy.
This is more of a thought exercise for us more than anything else. We're
Yes.
not saying print these out, save them till August, and draft off of
No.
them. This is a fun exercise for me and you to do, and hopefully the audience is enjoying it.
Probably not. Probably not. Did you catch the comments from our head coaching predictions episode?
Which we are currently 3 for 3 on, I might add.
Boy.
Well, not three
Yeah.
for three technically, but it sounds like Aaron Glenn is going to be a done deal later today. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Raiders
Sorry,
fans.
Raiders fans.
You guys were upset. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, next one here at 23. Another dissenting opinions here. I might be too high on him, but
And I might
I'm
be too
still
low on him.
yeah, I'm still willing to step on the rake on Jonathan Taylor.
I think the Goldilocks consensus opinion, like when you merge ours together, is where JT should really be ranked.
Yeah, probably somewhere around like player 20, something like around there, whatever, maybe a few spots up or down. The thing, looking at Jonathan Taylor this past year, running back 5 in points per game, it didn't feel like that, but he still was good when he was on the field. And
I mean, it all came
uh,
at the end of the season when his fantasy managers were already eliminated. That's why it didn't feel like
yes,
it.
and that's probably the most frustrating thing is when he has
Consolation Bowl league winner.
the multi-touchdown game the week after literally just letting a touchdown go
Mhm.
over, out of his hands. But I kind of wanted to look at this, Dave, because pre-show you and I talked about I had Jonathan Taylor, excuse me, a little too high, and a lot of it was you don't like the fact that they are committing to Anthony Richardson and what could this mean for the offense. And just once again, small sample sizes, and maybe it doesn't mean anything because we looked at the small sample size last year with Michael Pittman and Anthony Richardson, and I was like, well, Michael Pittman was getting his targets, but in weeks 1 through 4 with Anthony Richardson, when he was playing bad, Jonathan Taylor was still the RB6. And we saw in those final 5 weeks of the season, Jonathan Taylor was also very, very good. I don't want to get I don't want to go too far down the narrative street where I say, well, Anthony Richardson is now the quarterback. This automatically means Jonathan Taylor can't be seen as a top 8 running back. Like, I'm still going to keep Jonathan Taylor in that RB6, anywhere from RB5 to RB7. And I don't think I can find a way to get him any lower than that in my rankings.
Yeah, like I said, you're probably closer to where you should be than I am. This was very much so me kind of sending a message. I just don't like what the Colts are doing. I don't
That's
think
fair.
Anthony Richardson is it. We've seen the entire offense can
Oh, I forgot to
sputter.
mention.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I totally forgot to mention. They just signed a new defensive coordinator from the Cincinnati Bengals, Lou Anarumo.
they did.
So that's going to be a big step up for them. I mean, whatever your opinions might be, I know the Bengals defense wasn't great towards the end of the year, but I mean, people were going goo goo gaga over the Bengals defense early in the season, and Sweet Lou has been able to put out a good defense. So if we are looking at a team that might want to establish the run and have a smash mouth defense, it might be the Colts, and they might have to do that with Anthony Richardson.
It could be, yeah. And like I said, 34 is probably a little too low on him. He probably deserves to be at like that 2-3 bubble. Um, but yeah, for me, it just comes down to concerns about the Colts as a whole, the direction of the
Okay,
franchise, the commitment to Anthony Richardson. I just have a lot of big picture worries about the Colts more than anything else.
that's fair. That's super fair. Next on here, we got a little bit of a run of running backs. At 22, we've got Derrick Henry, who were both pretty much the same on him. And then at 21, Bucky Irving. Dave, I'm
Real
gonna
quick
like
on Derrick Henry,
clear out.
I
Yeah,
just want to ask you, where do you think his draft position is, his ADP? You and I have him at 24 and 23. Do you think that's where he's going? Like, are we going to be able to
no,
draft Derrick Henry at the 2-3 turn? Because I think people are going to be
no,
reaching for him.
first round.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. And I
I think
hate to
it's
be
gonna be
that
the
guy.
end of
Like, I don't
first
want to be the
round.
guy every year that's like, well, I'm not going to get Derrick Henry. But if Derrick Henry's going in round one, I'm probably not going to be drafted next year.
But that's the context that you need.
Right.
It's not that you don't like Derrick Henry as a player or that you don't even think he has the fantasy value. It's that he's probably going to go too early. And I know I talked about this in the mistakes that we made, that when you believe in a player, it's okay to draft them earlier than ADP. But there's also times where if you don't believe that that player is going to outperform that ADP, then you don't need to draft them. And
Mhm.
I don't know that Derrick Henry will unabashedly outperform a top 3, top 4 running back, top 12 pick ADP.
I
And
mean, he
that's
does it
the
every
biggest
year,
thing for
but
me.
this year,
Damn
we
it, Dave.
finally got it.
Oh, damn it. All right. Well, let's just move on. Why'd you have to do that? Why'd you do it? Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Next one on here, number 21. Like I was about to say, I'm going to clear out here for you. And I want to hear your thoughts on Bucky Irving because he's our number 21 player. I've got him at 28. You've got him at 19. This is our biggest disparity. My thing is simply I don't know what's going to happen with Liam Cohen, the offensive coordinator for the Bucks, and that might not affect Baker, but it could drastically affect the run game. And yes, Bucky Irving did take over the majority of the carries in Tampa. Rashad White still exists. I'm not suggesting he's going to get a ton of carries, but we may never see the big workload for Bucky Irving. He's incredibly efficient. He's a really good playmaker. Um, I'm curious, Dave. I'm just very curious to see because I've also seen ADP where he's going back into the first round.
Oh,
There's
I
there's
forget who, and I don't want like I'm not trying to clown somebody. I think everybody has their reason for it, but I came across a recent 2025 fantasy football rankings article where Bucky Irving was fifth overall. Fifth.
see, okay, this is a good reason why we do this because sometimes we get a little too hot. We get a little too sweaty. We get the vapors, and we're just like, "Oh my stars, Bucky Irving needs to be a top 5 pick." And maybe we don't have to do that all the
I
time,
too
guys.
turn into a sweet old Southern lady when I get excited.
You get the fan going.
Ooh, Lord.
So you've got him at 19, which is firmly in the second round. I've got him just outside of the second round, and maybe I'm a little too low. Dave, talk to me about Bucky Irving.
I mean, it's just the efficiency. He's
Yeah,
so good. Like I'm looking at player profiler right now. Just scroll right down to the efficiency rows that they have here. In true yards per carry, he was sixth. Yards per touch, he was sixth. Juke rate, he was fifth. Evaded tackles, he was sixth. Explosive rating, sixth. Breakaway runs, sixth. Yards created, fourth. Yards created per touch, eighth. EPA, 10th. I mean, like every single efficiency metric, he just ranks inside the top 10. And you don't need the numbers to tell you either. Like, Bucky Irving has this skill. I don't really know what you'd call it, but he's the type of football player that, like, you don't have to be a football fan to watch Bucky Irving play and be like, wow, he's good. Like, I could show this, I could show Bucky Irving film to my mom and she'd be like, who is that guy? Like, he is really good. You just can't ignore him. Like, the way that he is able to break and evade tackles, the way he can generate yards after
He's a
contact.
joystick player,
Yeah, I
honestly.
mean, he's like a bigger Tariq Cohen. That's what I think of when I see Bucky Irving playing. And it just comes down to that. I mean, he's a guy who very clearly stole the lead role there. We're going to see a mix of Rashad White. We're going to see a mix of some other guys, but that's pretty much what you see in any backfield in today's NFL. So for me, second round pick, if Bucky Irving's there, I'm drafting him and not thinking twice.
I think and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. I think I'm going to have a bit more of a dividing line between the running backs I know get serious volume
Mhm.
versus the running backs that I don't know, because it's looking more and more like the running back position is very deep. And I know everyone's saying, well, running back as a position is back for fantasy. We need to be drafting them higher. Well, if that's the case, it's also looking a lot deeper than ever before, which kind of means that drafting wide receiver early is still
Oh, it's
there. I mean,
back.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I mean, I know it's back, but like we're talking about running backs all the way in the fourth round that we're still comfortable drafting. So it's still very much there. Uh, Dave, let's go. Let's finish off this tier, and we got to speed up, man. We have taken so long to get through some of
There's
these
so
early
much to talk
guys,
about.
but
We're only doing one show a
there
week
is,
now, Alfredo. Like,
there is,
we're trying to stretch it out as much as we can here.
there is. Enjoy this jam-packed episode, everybody. It's gonna be a long one. Go get a water break. Pause this. Go to the bathroom. Buckle up. At the end of tier 5 here, Trey McBride at number 20. I've got him at 21. Dave, you've got him at 25. We both have him as tight end too. We both have him as tight end too. I think the only difference here is that I have him directly behind the tight end one, Brock Bowers, and you have a bigger gap. And we'll talk about that when we get to Brock Bowers. But let's go to tier number 4, where we start this off with 3 players that we are kind of all over the board on. And it's at 19, Chase Brown, at 18, Christian McCaffrey, and at 17, Kyron Williams. Now, Dave, you are much higher on Chase Brown. You got him as your 15th player. I got him at 27th. Christian
Yeah.
McCaffrey, you're oh no, you're good. You're good. Let's start with Chase Brown though. Let's not go through all of these guys. Let's start at Chase Brown. You're at 15. I'm at 27. What has you so confident in Chase Brown going into next year?
I mean, this guy was getting 100% of the opportunities in a very, very good offense. And of course, I have this little asterisk next to every single running back that we're going to talk about. It's really hard to talk about running backs because if this team goes out and makes a splashy signing in the offseason, or if Ashton Ginty falls to them and they take him in round one, yeah, then I've
Oh
got to change
God.
my, yeah,
Oh,
I got to
oh
change my Chase Brown ranking then, if that's the case. But as it stands right now, Chase Brown is a good player. We know that he can handle the volume. He is a pass catching machine, scores a bunch of touchdowns. He's on a good offense. He checks every single box that I want to see for a running back that I'm drafting in fantasy football. So I've got him, at 15, kind of at that 1-2 turn. And assuming the Bengals roster stays as is, I mean, with or without T. Higgins, I don't think that affects him that much. But assuming the backfield stays as is, that's kind of where I'm comfortable taking Chase Brown, is at that 1-2 turn.
yeah, it's the way he finished the end of that year, and it wasn't just getting a ton of volume on the ground. It's that he was catching passes through the air, and I think I can probably end up where you're at and have him firmly in that second round, have him just outside of it. But if there's no T Higgins and we're looking at a Bengals offense that is going to be relying on Jamar Chase and Chase Brown, well, yeah, all of a sudden Chase Brown to me is an easy second round pick, and one of those guys that I think that is going to get a lot of volume. I think right now I'm still kind of waiting to see what happens with T Higgins. What could they do at running back? I don't know that they necessarily need to go and add another player. Um, the Zach Moss experiment kind of failed, but we'll see what happens there.
So let me just real quick, Zach Moss was the lead back to start the year, and we kind of
Yep.
saw that shift happen in week 4. From
Yep.
week 4 onward, PPR leagues, where do you think Chase Brown finished on a per game basis?
Was he was really, really good.
RB
I want to
six,
say like
Alfredo.
I was going to say
RB
RB
six.
eight. Yeah.
Yeah. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and Jameer Gibbs were the only players who outscored him on a per game basis. And that's not a small sample size. I'm not talking, the last few weeks of the season. This is from week 4 through week 8. I mean, like, it took
Yeah.
him a month to kind of usurp the role from Zach Moss, and then he was just a plug and play RB1 from there on. So, of course, things can change if they add a running back, but as it stands right now, Chase Brown's probably going to be a top 10 running back again next year.
Fun fact: Bengals went 8-4 after Chase Brown became the starting running back. So
Hmm.
they were a winning team with him. Maybe that's something that they consider going into the offseason. We
The
need to
last
give
thing I'll
Chase Brown
say
the ball
too
more.
is you look back in college, he was a workhorse in college. Second most touches in his final year of anybody in the NCAA that season. I mean, this isn't just a little scat back. Like, he can be a workhorse, and we saw that translates to the NFL level as well. So, a workhorse on a good offense who catches passes and scores touchdowns. Again, that's every single box that I want to check.
Yeah. There's already, by the way, there's already articles. Should the Bengals draft Ashton Jeanty round 1?
I mean, if he falls, they've got pretty much everything else. Like, there aren't a lot of huge holes in this offense. He is, as we've seen, first round running back is more of a finishing piece, like we saw with the Lions. And I think the Bengals are there where if they could have a duo of Ginty and Chase Brown, my goodness, I don't know how you stop that offense.
Man, I do get worried. I think that's where good teams falter, is when they start to spend money or capital on positions that they're already good. Maybe I'm stupid because the Lions did it and they were perfectly fine. So there we go. I'm dumb. Next player on here, Christian McCaffrey, 18. Dave, I've got him at 22. You've got him at 16. We both have him in the second round. It's kind of weird to not only talk about Christian McCaffrey as a player that's not a top running back, but not even in the first round. So you seem to have a little bit more faith. It's
Now,
hard
I
because
don't.
this is okay. Okay, good. Because like
I mean, I
this
ranked him
is
a few
such a
spots higher, but ugh.
there's no data point that you can look at. There's nothing on film where you could say he's going to break out or he's gotten worse. This is all just the ever intangible, ever elusive medical. And we don't know what to do here. I think this is going to be, at least for my part, is did he fall to a good spot in my league? Is he at the end of the second round where I feel comfortable taking him because that's a league winning pick? I think it's going to be a lot of Christian McCaffrey is going to be a lot of how we felt about Cooper Kupp this past year, and maybe we didn't learn our lesson in taking older guys that are injured, or dealing with injuries, but that they could be league winners. I don't know, Dave.
Yeah, I think I wrote an article, 2025 fantasy football draft rankings way too early. And I did little write-ups on every single player. And my write-up for Christian McCaffrey was just a bunch of questions. Here. Have the touches and injuries finally taken their toll? Will Christian McCaffrey look like his old self after the injuries? Will the 49ers exercise the option to release him? And it's just a series of questions. We have no idea. The 49ers are in flux right now. They have a lot of big decisions to make, and one of those decisions is going to be regarding Christian McCaffrey, where they can save a lot of money if they choose to release him. And I talked about this last offseason. Christian McCaffrey could easily go the way of Austin Eckler, where he is just a consensus top 3 running back for years and years and years and years, has one season where he gets injured, then he gets released, then he signs to a new team, and then all of a sudden we're drafting him as kind of a back end RB3. If he stays in San Francisco, I think this is about where I'd feel comfortable drafting Christian McCaffrey in the middle of round 2. If he ends up on a different team, round 6, round 8, because that tells me that the 49ers, who know him better than anybody, have given up hope and given up faith. And if that's the case, then I'm completely out. But if he stays in San Francisco, I might be willing to swing for the upside if he drops.
Yeah, I don't even have an opinion on it. I'm not gonna lie. I don't
Yeah,
have an opinion on Christian McCaffrey because we
right.
don't know what's there. It's gonna be all about where he falls. The next running back on here, 17, and this might be a little hyperbolic when I say it, but I think he might be the perfect round 2 pick, in my opinion. Kyron Williams. I've got him, Dave, as running back, or excuse me, as number 15 overall. You've got him at 21 overall. That puts him at 17 for us. Kyron Williams, nothing happened this past year that's going to make me believe that the volume is going away for him. The touchdown efficiency was still there. The usage in the passing game was still there. This offense, unless something drastic happens where Matt Stafford is gone, this offense still seems to go through two players, Puka Nakua and Kyron Williams. And I think he and maybe Chase Brown, depending on what happens with Chase Brown, but he might be one of the last running backs that, in my opinion, has a true workhorse volume. So I'm willing to draft him a little bit earlier. I don't know, maybe first round, but like I'm willing to go early second round on Kyron Williams if I need to.
This is gonna be year 3 of me being the Kyron Williams hater, huh? I guess,
But why? But why? Like, because I mean, we still see over 300. I'm looking at it right now.
oh,
Over
yeah, I'm not gonna
300 carries.
volume is there, yeah.
The 16 touchdowns. Like, it's just every year he's just been so damn good. The offense is good.
2 years.
It's crazy. I said every year. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
2 years. Yeah,
yeah.
shut up.
I
Go.
mean, he was hurt his rookie year. I don't know. I feel like I'm just spinning in a circle saying the same thing year after year after year. I just don't think that there's anything exceptionally special about what he does. I think that he is a replaceable player. Rookies never get a lot of touches, and that's why I wasn't fading Kyron Williams super hard going into this season. But Blake Corum going into year 2, we could see that role grow a little bit. I just don't want to put one of my premium picks, a top 15, top 20 pick. I don't want to be investing that on a guy who has a lot of dead zone red flags. So, yeah, I've got him at 21 overall, meaning I'd take him at the end of round 2. Unfortunately, though, kind of predicting where ADP is going to land, if that's where I'm comfortable drafting into the end of round 2, I'm probably not going to have any Kyron Williams next year.
Hmm. Because I look at Kyron and I look at the other running backs in that area, and I'm not seeing much of a difference between him and Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Chase Brown, who you mentioned. There's probably even maybe some advantages to Kyron Williams over guys like Devon Achan, Jameer Gibbs, not being in this kind of work share. Nothing from this year made me believe that Blake Corum comes in and starts to take 40% of the workload, even 30% of the workload. It still feels like this is very much a Kyron Williams led backfield, and Corum is going to be the insurance policy. Now, all that could change over the offseason depending on what Sean McVay says or what happens with Matt Stafford. But my faith in Kyron Williams is finally there. And maybe this is the year I get burned for it. I don't know.
Yeah. And
That's
again, you look at like the overall metrics and they're great, but you look at the per touch metrics and you look at the efficiency metrics. And that's, again, where I just get a little bit concerned. And Sean McVay, he has proven now for 2 straight years that he is willing to just prop up less than, great backs with insane volume. And that could happen again next year. But that also is just a telltale sign of a dead zone running back that I want to avoid.
next on here at 16, Brees Hall. I think it's a Jets thing, man. Like I think we're just kind of worried what's happening with the Jets. What are they doing with these extra two running backs? They started to give some volume to who ends up being the next coach. Aaron Glenn strikes me as a guy who's going to try to recreate what the Lions have done, which is let's get a run and heavy approach. Let's get multiple running backs back there. Let's control the clock. Let's control the ground game, which could be great for Brees. But it could also lend to more and more running back usage with other players on the team. So it's he's going to have to be very efficient, which is something he has not been always. And we'll see how that ends up playing out. At 15, Dave, Brock Bowers, tight end for the Raiders, and this is where we have a little bit of the not huge disagreement, but I've got him at 20. You've got him at 12. And for me, this is I don't know if there's a huge gap between Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and George Kittle. And maybe Brock Bowers makes the big jump in fantasy football. But from a fantasy points perspective, there wasn't a huge gap. And I don't want to have to take a tight end that early if there's not a gigantic advantage that I'm getting at the position. So I think we're a few touchdowns away from Trey McBride easily being the tight end one. Uh, Dave, what say you on Brock Bowers?
I mean, the usage for Brock Bowers was just insane. He was on,
Yeah.
one of the worst teams in the NFL with just a constant carousel at starting quarterback. And he was second in the league in receptions behind only Jamar Chase. So, I mean, Brock Bowers had a little bit of a touchdown issue himself. And that was in the shadow of Trey McBride, who just had awful touchdown luck. But Brock Bowers is just so good. And, we're comparing him to George Kittle, who's going to be 33 years old. We're comparing him to Trey McBride, who's heading into year 3. Brock Bowers did all of this as a rookie. So I think that's what's
Yep.
most exciting is that, he was already basically in the same tier as these guys in his first season. And now, with a good draft pick, they can address the quarterback position. They're going to be bringing in a new head coach, not this old school Antonio Pierce type of guy that just wants to run the ball. I think that the situation around him is going to improve. He already showed us his rookie season that he's a great player. I've got Brock Bowers 12th overall. I mean, I'd take him at the end of round one.
Wow. Wow. Do you feel like he gives you that big of an advantage at the tight end position? I know a lot of it ends up having to be projection, but do you think he's going to do that much more than Trey McBride, who, let me go back and look. Trey McBride, you got him at 25. So you're not taking Trey McBride in the first two rounds, but you're willing to take Brock Bowers in the first round. Why the disparity?
Because, like I said, he did it as a rookie. So we expect to see if he can already do this as a rookie. He's only going to
So a
improve
big
more.
jump.
He's got a lot more room to grow. And for me, I mean, it's Brock Bowers is the clear cut tight end one. And then I've got
Okay.
Trey McBride and Kittle kind of close to each other. And then, like we talked about with quarterbacks, if I don't get one of those three guys, just I'll wait till the end of my draft. Somebody's going to pop up next year, and we'll figure out who that guy is going to be as we dig into it a little bit more. But I think those are the three kind of difference makers. I'm just willing to pay up for Brock Bowers, knowing that since he already did this as a rookie, he has a lot of room that he can still grow going into year two.
Man, I'm kind of seeing how my next year's drafts are going to be shaking out. Kyron Williams in the second, Trey McBride in the third. This is going to be fun. It's going to be really fun. Let's finish out this tier number 4. At 14, Josh Jacobs, and at 13, AJ Brown. Not much to say on those. We're pretty much in the same area with each of those guys. Let's get to tier number 3, where we start to get to some of the big names. Tier 3, at number 12, Malik Neighbors, wide receiver for the New York Giants. At 11, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Dave, I've got him at 9. You've got him at 13. This is something you talked about throughout the year, where at some point you asked a poignant question. Is Amon-Ra St. Brown now a touchdown dependent player? How dependent is he going to be on that? Jameson Williams' role grew. Jahmyr Gibbs' role grew. Now there's no Ben Johnson. So I do
Mhm.
get the concerns, but it's kind of hard for me to knock a guy that we keep seeing as a top 4 wide receiver every single year. I get the projection of other players, like some of these rookies and like some of the guys like a Nico Collins that maybe missed some time. So I do understand that. Why outside of the first round for you?
I mean, his usage fell off a cliff this year, and I don't think people realize it. He was 10th in the league in targets, fewest targets per game since his rookie season. And like you said, Ben Johnson is going to be gone next year. That's huge. Jameson Williams, though, is the big story. Jameson Williams has developed into a very, very good wide receiver, and I think so much of Amonra's fantasy production over the last couple of years has been volume dependent. And when that volume just gets shaved down a little bit, it doesn't need to be huge, but you shave that volume down a little bit, then all of a sudden he does become this kind of touchdown dependent player. So I still like him on St. Brown. He is a great wide receiver, but that change in usage, like when you're getting out targeted by Jerry Judy and a rookie tight end like that's concerning to me. So I still like him on St. Brown, but a couple of the guys that I have ranked ahead of him, Brock Bowers and Malik Neighbors, I think are guys who are trending up. Well, Monroe St. Brown, I don't know how much room he really has to grow in this offense right now. And I just want to shout out Malik Neighbors real quickly. We quickly glossed over his name.
Mhm.
35% target share this year.
Yeah,
Led
it's
the
insane.
NFL and was the highest target share any rookie receiver has pulled in NFL history. So, despite being on a very bad Giants team, not knowing who the quarterback is on a week in to week out basis, it didn't matter. His role didn't change. Malik Neighbors is a guy that you and I both comfortably have inside round one. And I expect that's kind of where his ADP will shake out. But I think that could be surprising to a lot of people to be like, what, Malik Neighbors? We don't even know who his quarterback is. It doesn't matter. He is immediately cemented himself as one of the best wide receivers in the league.
It's interesting. I'm looking at this, and as much as I think we want to say the running back position is back, looking at my first round, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wide receivers still dominating that first round. It doesn't feel
Yep.
any different than it was this past year.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, we saw it. I think a lot of people took their victory laps very early in the season, saying, haha, you fools who drafted zero running back, look at you now. And then what happened? All of those running backs just kind of fell off a cliff. Unless you had Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry, your running back fell off a cliff at the end of the season.
Yep.
And the guys that were the quote unquote league winners, Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard, those were all zero running back targets that you were getting in round 8 and round 10. So I think zero wide receiver, or I'm sorry, zero running back has still proven to be the optimal draft strategy.
And there's something that we've been talking about here is a lot of these second year players. And I probably have to raise my rankings on them a little bit because it's something that we talked about in previous episodes where it's like the mistakes that we've made that we don't want to make again. And it's not paying attention to rookies and second year players that have just massive seasons. And I think it's the mental hurdle that you're not necessarily drafting them at their peak. You're drafting them
Yes.
at a projection where they can continue to get better and better. Where maybe this guy you're drafting as wide receiver 6, that's not his peak. He could be wide receiver 1 overall. I'm talking about a guy like Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas or any of these players. So we could absolutely see that from them. I think
I
that's
think
just the
JSN
important
is a
thing to
perfect
remember.
example of a guy that like showed a
Yep.
little bit of promise as a rookie, but not enough that people really wanted to get on board. And anybody who was willing to say, "Hey, I saw enough in his rookie season that I'm going to make it this investment going into year two," they got it. Same thing with Chase Brown. These year two players consistently, year in and year out, are some of the best investments you can make on draft day. And that's why I've got three of them inside my top 12.
Yeah. Man, I loved JSN going into this year. I'm not patting yeah, I'm patting my own back a little bit here, but I was really happy that one worked out. JSN and Jameson Williams, thanks guys.
We both did because, for multiple
Yes.
one, I think people just ignore the fact that he had a broken hand in
Yes.
minicamp during his rookie season. Like, he didn't play at all in the preseason, never really got up to NFL speed. We saw that he was healthy coming into this year. We saw the changes with Ryan Grubb there. And sure, maybe his breakout was sped up by the DK Metcalf injury, but yeah, I think both of us were all over JSN this offseason for those reasons.
Yeah. And we're going to keep seeing young guys get better and better each year. And it's sometimes you have to be able to project how their season is going to go. And that's probably what we're going to end up doing with our guy here at number 10, Brian Thomas Jr., who had himself a phenomenal year. At number 9, Devon Achan, running back for the Miami Dolphins. This is going to be interesting, Dave, because this is another guy who incredibly efficient. Are we expecting Miami to change the way that the backfield goes? There's just I'm a Miami resident, been a lifelong Dolphins fan. I have no idea what they're going to do in this offseason. However, what I do know is that Devon Achan is going to remain one of the top 3 offensive pieces on this team. The only thing I have to ask myself is, could the target volume go down with a healthy Tyreek Hill? Does the target volume go up if Tyreek and Jalen Waddle just simply can't stay healthy? Like there's any which way this could go. I think Achan is kind of like Gibbs in that he could be a number 1 or number 2 running back overall in fantasy football. But with Achan, I think there's a greater possibility that the floor falls out from underneath us.
I feel like the first round's kind of flat this year, if I'm being honest. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Barkley and Chase give you a nice start, but then with the fall off that you'll be getting in the next couple of rounds, I don't know if it's really worth it here. I think, we see it a lot where it's kind of behooves drafters to pick at the end of round one because you can still get the number one overall player at their position while still getting a high second round pick as well. And when I start looking at a lot of these guys that we have kind of projected at the end of
Yep.
round one, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Devon Achan, Jameer Gibbs, would it surprise you if any of these guys finish as the RB1 or the wide receiver one? No, I don't think it will at all. So I think looking at next year, this is going to kind of be that sweet spot. I'm really going to like picking in that 9 through 12 range where I can walk away with Achan, Gibbs, Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., maybe Nico Collins slides there, maybe Puka Nakua slides there, but I'm okay just kind of picking in that range, letting the drafters ahead of me make the decisions for me and just take whoever falls.
Yeah, this is flat is the right word. And not that it's missing talent. It's that the
There's
talent
a
is
lot
kind
of
of almost
talent.
yeah, it's just the same across the board here. And I think that you can make the argument that anyone all the way to our number 12 player, Malik Neighbors, could
Mhm.
end up being the number 1 overall player in fantasy. So this is going to be a really interesting first
Yeah.
round. Let's close out this tier number 3 here, Dave. At number 8, we've got Jameer Gibbs, a guy who both of us at one point or another have said he's the best running back in football.
I say it
Not
all the
fantasy
time. I,
football,
I tweeted it
best
the
running
other
back.
the other day during the game. Like,
Yeah.
he is the best running back in football.
Yep.
Speed,
Best running
power,
back.
contact balance, pass catching abilities. Like, there isn't a thing he can't do.
Yep. Yep. I think the only now detractors are there's no more Ben Johnson
Hmm.
and that David Montgomery still lives. And like that's what it sorry, I've let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
David Montgomery exists on the Lions. I'm not trying to kill David Montgomery, everybody. Don't get at me in the comments, Lions fans. But
The few
Sonic,
weeks that
man,
we saw though, yeah,
it
Gibbs
was
with no
beautiful.
Montgomery. Whoo.
It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah,
It was
like
beautiful.
let's say just I don't even want to put it into the world, but let's say something happens and David Montgomery can't play next year. I think Gibbs becomes a top three pick. I mean, he's in the same tier as Barkley and Chase if you remove Montgomery from the equation.
Could there? And it's not even like there's going to be a market where David Montgomery could get traded because there are going to be so many good rookie running backs coming into the NFL this year. It is a stacked running back class in the NFL draft. Same with tight ends, by the way, stacked at tight end. So it's going to be interesting to see how this draft board shapes out for people. Dave, let's finish this tier number 3. At 7, we got Nico Collins, who I got him at 8. You got him at 7. Not much to talk about there, but Nico was, I think, headed right towards that same area as CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua. He was right there in that area
He
until,
never really bounced back after the injury either. There
yeah,
was a
and that was it.
hamstring that caused him to miss over a month, and then when he came back, he was never really the same player. So it wouldn't surprise me if because of that, Nico has fallen into like round 2 next year.
Mhm.
I will not be ranking him that low, but it'll be really interesting to see where the public lands on Collins.
I mean, if you can take Nico Collins in round 2, I think he and who I talked about earlier, Kyron, end up becoming some of my favorite round 2 picks, like easily, easily. I'll be interested to see where ADP has these guys. All right, now let's do the final 2 tiers. We're gonna put them together because there's obviously not a lot of players. There's 6 of them. So in tier 2, we've got at number 6, CeeDee Lamb. At number 5, Justin Jefferson. At 4, Puka Nacua. And at 3, Bijan Robinson. Dave, there's probably as much dissension as we could potentially have this high in the rankings. I've got Puka Nacua at 6th overall. You've got him at 3 overall. So he is your wide receiver 2. You've got him ahead of CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. And then you've got him ranked ahead of Bijan Robinson as well. So what is it for Puka Nacua that makes him such a slam dunk pick for you early in drafts?
I mean, he got hurt early in the season. Took a couple weeks to kind of ramp him back up when he was returning from that injury. He had the ejection as well. So, really, what we have, and again, we're kind of looking at a small sample size here, but I think there's context that allows us to look at this small sample size, the injuries and the ejection. From week 10 onward, that was the only time that he was really a full time player. He averaged 18.6 half PPR points per game, second only to Jamar Chase. So I think it's just that. I mean, he is so good. And Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 1 early in the season. We saw that shift happen last year. I think that assuming Matthew Stafford is back in Los Angeles next year, we're going to see the same treatment for Puka Nacua that we saw from Cooper Kupp when he was the Triple Crown receiver just a couple of years ago. He's the guy here. And I think that when you compare his talent level, what he can do with the athleticism and the physicality, you can make the argument that Puka Nacua now is a better receiver than Cooper Kupp was 2, 3 years ago when he was looking like one of the best receivers in football. So, yeah, for me, outside of Chase and Saquon, Puka is next up for me in my rankings.
Yeah, I think we can continue just to make the same statement that we have before. And I'm sorry it's not more entertaining, but we can just simply say that this is a very flat section of the draft. And I kind of view Puka and CeeDee Lamb as identical players, which is why I've got them 5 and 6 in my rankings. A lot of it's going to depend on, is the quarterback coming back, or is the quarterback healthy? These guys are going to get their volume, they're going to score touchdowns, and they are the straw that stirs the drink of their offense. That's really what it is. Justin Jefferson, I feel like I kind of learned my lesson. Don't doubt Justin Jefferson, regardless
Yeah.
of who's playing quarterback. Like,
Uh-huh.
that's just it. I'm not going to doubt Kevin O'Connell. I'm not going to doubt Justin Jefferson. I think any one of these 3 wide receivers that we mentioned, Lamb, Jefferson, Nacua, they've got the juice to be the wide receiver 1 or the number 1 overall player in fantasy. So
So when the
it's,
Vikings make the announcement that they're sticking with Daniel Jones next year as their week 1 starter, that they're retreading that guy, you're still just going to say, no, I'm taking Jefferson top 5.
I mean, you talked about the volume that Malik Neighbors was getting
Oh,
and
I'm
how
with you.
how how
Yeah.
great that was. Like, yeah, even if it is Daniel Jones, I watched Kevin O'Connell make Josh Dobbs a starting quarterback.
Yes.
He did it for Sam Darnold. Like, my faith is fully in Kevin O'Connell. He can make me a starting quarterback in the, maybe not, but I'm willing to believe in Justin Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell, and the Vikings offense.
I'm very
Let's
confident that if you got a full 17 games with Kevin O'Connell, you'd complete at least one pass.
yes, one pass, not per game, just one
One
pass.
pass. Yeah.
Yes,
17 full
yes.
games. I think you can do it, Alfredo. I have faith.
Get those reps in at practice, boy. All right, ending the tier number 2, we've got Bijan Robinson here as the number 3 overall player, and I actually think there's a decent argument that could be made
Yeah.
for Bijan Robinson to be the running back 1 overall, simply because we don't often see the running back 1 overall ever repeat. And we kind of have Saquon Barkley as the running back 1, and that's just sort of by default. But we saw Bijan Robinson. He was right there on the heels of Saquon Barkley. 20.2 half PPR points from week 6 on. Saquon Barkley, 20.6. So this is another one. Most of the season, Bijan and Saquon, nearly the same player. The
I know
way I look at
18
it this
doesn't
way,
count, but if we throw 18 into that equation, Bijan
yep,
outscored Saquon,
yep. And that's why I kept it out of there. But yeah, he outscored him.
even on a
But I
per
think that
game. I mean, he had a huge final week of the season. So, I mean,
that week
he's
18
turning up.
matters
Yeah.
because it was Michael Penix, and
Hmm.
that's the kind of sample size that you want. You want to see that with this new quarterback, the Atlanta Falcons could be a lot better. And that was the last thing I was going to say here is that with Bijan, I think we've kind of scratched the surface of how good he could be because of how bad that offense was. So you get Michael Penix in there, who's probably not going to run as much. He's going to be dumping that ball off to Bijan. We saw him start doing that towards the end of the year. I think there's very much an argument to be made for Bijan Robinson as the running back 1 overall in fantasy football.
Yeah.
All right, final 2 players. We've got them crisscrossed. I've got Jamar Chase as my number 1 player. You've got Saquon Barkley as your number 1 player.
Why do you hate
Dave,
Saquon Barkley?
yeah, no, I absolutely hate him. I think if
I
anyone,
hate Jamar Chase.
I mean, we've got guys that are just doing legendary things. Jamar Chase, Triple Crown, and Saquon Barkley, 2,000 rushing yards. I think if you want to get, a little spooky with it and talk about the guys who rush for over 2,000 yards, what happens to them the next year,
Yeah.
sure, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that we need to have sort of a sliding scale with players as the NFL years go on. The length of seasons are moving, medicine practices are changing, and players are, especially Saquon Barkley, he's getting this yardage without getting the insane amount of touches that we've seen other guys get in the past. So,
What I'll say about
listen,
Saquon, yeah, he could be
yeah,
a bust. It could be
he could
CMC
he could get
2.0.
injured.
He can get hurt, fall off the age cliff. All those things are possible, but I think that
Yep.
when you start looking at like who you need to take at the top of round 1 next year, it's Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase. Another reason
It's
that I think I'll
something.
prefer having a late first round pick next year as opposed to
Yeah,
the 101 and 102. Let other
yeah,
people make the decision for me, and I will happily get the good guys still available at picks 9, 10, 11, 12.
that's exactly it. I think that we can safely say that. Looking through it once again, I think all 12 of the guys here in the first round, we can say that their offense runs through them. Is that a fair statement? I think the only one that I might actually like waver on a little bit is Devon Achan, but I still think that
Yeah,
the
the offense
Dolphins
kind of
offense
runs
runs
through
through
him.
him.
Yeah.
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 I mean, everything runs through these players, so it's a matter
I
of
mean, he's a
good
running
players,
back who
good
gets wide
offense.
receiver usage and running
Yep.
back usage. Like, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's there. Well, Dave, we did it. We not only went through our top 36, we actually had our top 39 players,
Ooh,
put them all into tiers. Boy, hour long.
I just
Hour
realized we
long.
forgot about
Did it.
somebody. Kyle Pitts. He wasn't anywhere in there. Kind of weird. He's still just what, 24 years old? We're not going back to that well.
You deserve this. You deserve this right now. Well, anyways, this was a great show until that exact moment. But that's when I think we know we do need to end the episodes when Dave's
Yeah.
talking about Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
But we'll be back again next week. Like Dave said, we're doing one show a week, and we're going to be excited. We're going to be talking all various things, the effects of these new head coaches and what kind of effects they might have on their players, the Senior Bowl and rookies, NFL draft and combine free agency. There's so much going on in the offseason. So don't go hibernating on us for a few months and then come back when it's fantasy football season. We got a lot of great stuff that we're going to be talking about. So as always, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening all the way through to this jam-packed super episode. For myself, for Dave, for everyone here at Football Guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Adios.